All right, let's talk about human evolution. In this explainer, we're going to dive into the real story, moving beyond the common myths to get a clear picture of how we actually got here.
I'm willing to bet you've seen this picture before. It's famous, right? It shows this neat, orderly line, from an ape-like creature to an early human, all the way to us, like it was just a straight march towards a final goal.
Well, here's the thing. That image, as iconic as it is just wrong. Completely. It gives us a totally misleading idea of how we came to be. So let's break this down. First, we need to completely dismantle this idea of a straight line march of progress and look at what the science actually tells us.
You see, instead of a straight road, think of our history more like a tangled, branching bush. It's a story filled with all these different offshoots, and most of them, well, they eventually hit a dead end and went extinct.
Okay, so if it wasn't a neat line, what did our family tree look like? The reality is honestly way more complicated, and frankly, a lot more interesting than that old drawing.
Let's tackle a big one right away. The idea that we evolved from the chimps you see today. That's not true. The reality is, both humans and chimps evolved from a common ancestor who lived about 7 million years ago. They're our closest living relatives, our cousins, not our grandparents.
And get this, our family history was crowded. I mean, really crowded. Scientists have found fossils from more than 20 different species of early humans. We call them hominins. And a lot of them were walking the earth at the very same time, sometimes in the same places. And another thing, all those traits we think of as human, they didn't just pop up overnight in one neat package. It was more of a mosaic. For instance, walking on two legs, bipedalism, evolved millions of years before our brains started getting really big. So let's try to put this into perspective. We're going to walk through a very simplified timeline of this incredible 7 million year journey. Okay, so our journey kicks off about 7 million years ago with that shared ancestor. From there, you see early hominins like Ardithopithecus starting to walk upright. Then comes Australopithecus. You might know the famous fossil Lucy. They were fully bipedal, but their brains were still pretty small, about the size of an ape's. It's only when our own genus Homo shows up that you start to see bigger brains and, crucially, the first stone tools. And check this out. One of our relatives, Homo erectus, was unbelievably successful. They were the first to venture out of Africa, and they survived for almost 2 million years. Just to put that in perspective, our species, Homo sapiens, we've only been around for about 300,000 years so far. Not even close. Now, fast forward to a time much closer to our own. We were not alone. We shared the planet with other smart, capable human species. You've heard of the Neanderthals in Europe, and there were also the Denisovans in Asia. These weren't some primitive stepping stones on the way to us, they were our contemporaries. And here's where it gets really personal. Our ancestors didn't just live alongside them, they interbred. And that genetic legacy is still with us today. If your ancestry is from outside of Africa, you likely have a little bit of Neanderthal DNA. Some of us even have Denisovan DNA. So, all this complexity, all these different species, it raises a huge question. Why? What was driving all this change? Why start walking on 2 feet or developing bigger brains? Well, it's really important to understand there was no master plan. Evolution doesn't have a goal. Instead, it's all about responding to pressure. Things like a wildly unstable climate in Africa forced our ancestors to become super adaptable. It pushed them to find new foods, move to new places, and rely on social cooperation to survive. And this is where you get this incredible feedback loop. Think about it. You develop better tools, which lets you get more high-energy food like meat. That extra energy is exactly what you need to grow a bigger, more expensive brain. And what does a bigger brain do? It helps you invent even better tools and create more complex social strategies. You can see the cycle. Okay, so this process of branching out and changing went on for millions and millions of years. But then, something pretty remarkable happened. If you look at the world around 40,000 years ago, every single other human species was gone. Only one was left, us, Homo sapiens. And that right there is probably the biggest mystery in our whole story. Why are we the only ones left? Why did our specific branch of this huge tangled family tree survive, when all the others, many of whom were super successful for a very long time, vanished? The truth is, there's no single simple answer. It was probably a messy mix of a lot of different things. Maybe we outcompeted them for food and shelter. Maybe our species was just more flexible when the climate went haywire.
In some places, we may have simply absorbed other groups through interbreeding. And you can never rule out things like disease, or even just plain old luck.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, this is interesting history, but why does it matter to me today? Well, it matters a lot. Our deep evolutionary past explains so many of our modern problems. That nagging back pain? That's partly because our spine was originally built for walking on all fours. Our intense cravings for sugar and fat? A fantastic survival instinct when calories were scarce, not so great in a world of fast food.
And this understanding totally dismantles harmful ideas about race. Genetically, as a species, we're all incredibly similar. The visible differences between people are, in the grand scheme of things, brand new and really superficial. They're just recent adaptations to things like different amounts of sunlight.
And maybe the biggest takeaway is this: we are not the goal of evolution. We're not the pinnacle of progress. We're simply the last branch standing on a family tree that used to be incredibly diverse and crowded.
And that history leaves us with a really powerful, maybe even humbling final thought. Our story is one of chance, adaptation, and constant change. And if extinction was the rule for every other human species that ever lived, it reminds us that our own survival isn't guaranteed. It's not our destiny. It's just a temporary condition.